All right. Well, while those guys look into that, let's shift into something that's deeply disturbing to me. Barry Jenkins is going to be directing a Lion King follow-up. Okay, so we ran that it was a sequel. I got called by the studio for a correction that it's not a sequel. It is a follow-up. So I don't quite...
Which, by the way, is not your fault. And I want to give Sean credit because we get news so quickly. Barry Jenkins' tweet says sequel.
It does, yes.
The director of the film says sequel on his Twitter.
I saw the Hollywood Reporter report prequel.
Prequel?
If you go to their article said prequel. I was so confused.
So here's Barry Jenkins' tweet. He says this, yes, this. And then I don't know if he just copied the title from Deadline, but his tweet says the Lion King sequel set with Moonlight director Barry Jenkins to helm for Walt Disney Studios.
All right. Well, neither here nor there, whether it's a sequel or a follow-up, I'm less concerned about that than I am, A, the fact that they are staying in this world, and B, that Barry Jenkins is doing it. And listen, Barry Jenkins can choose to do whatever he wants to do. I know we make this argument a lot of times that you don't want to see a filmmaker get swept up into a franchise machine or do a big budget movie. Barry Jenkins, in particular, seems to be one of these people with a very clear, defined voice who has the ability to tell really strong stories in the African-American community or in any community that he chooses to. And I would love to see 3 original Barry Jenkins movies with the budget he's going to get for The Lion King. So that's disheartening to me.
But here's the interesting thing about it. So when you're a filmmaker who primarily works in smaller independent type of films, if Beale Street Could Talk, Moonlight, sometimes you need the larger picture clearly to then make your... So look at Guy Ritchie, for example. Guy Ritchie is a great example. You do Aladdin, then you get to do your Gentleman movie. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't think that that's what Barry Jenkins' thought process is. I just based on what I can understand. I mean, Beale Street did not do well in theaters. Right. Moonlight won Best Picture, but I don't think it made more than 30 million worldwide. Right. And again, that doesn't speak to the quality of the film. I mean, Aladdin made $1 billion. Doesn't mean it's a great movie. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I do think though that maybe, and again, this is just completely guessing, that Jenkins needs some type of bigger production around him to do, and if he wants to continue working in the indie scene. Now, that being said, Lion King has a lot of themes in it that I think Barry Jenkins will be able to explore. And I think that Barry Jenkins is one of the best filmmakers working today. I think Beale Street was an absolute genius film. I mean, the music in that film was absolutely incredible. So I wonder if here's what I'm trying to get at. Guy Ritchie's voice was nowhere to be found in Aladdin.
Correct.
It wasn't there.
Correct.
That was not a Guy Ritchie movie. It was a Disney film that just had Guy Ritchie's name on it. Correct. I worry in this particular instance whether or not Barry Jenkins' voice will come through a major production. Like, what's Favreau's voice, right? Favreau directed the Lion King remake. What's his voice? I think he's he's a great director who doesn't necessarily have a specific signature style to him. I think he's just a good storyteller.
Would it almost be like pizza with no toppings on it?
Yeah.
Are you saying that he doesn't? Are you saying he doesn't have a flavor?
But cheese pizza is still amazing.
Do you know who I would compare Jon Favreau to the most is Ron Howard. I think Ron Howard is a perfectly
Ron Howard doesn't have a necessarily...
filmmaker.
Yeah, I don't think Ron Howard has like
Ron Howard is a hell of a lot better of a filmmaker than Jon Favreau.
No, but what Sean is saying... I think Ron Howard...
Jon Favreau could not make Apollo 13.
Ron Howard has a better filmography and is a better director than Jon Favreau, but I think what Sean's saying is that they both have... There's really... I guess what's Ron Howard's distinct voice? I don't know.
I think holding on to Tom Hanks as hard as he can.
I mean, he's a good storyteller, but
sure,
I mean, I don't know
wouldn't.
What's his voice?
Ron Howard's whole process is because he comes from an acting background. His whole process is finding a script. Right. The same as when we talked about like Spielberg. His whole process is finding a script and then trying to get really talented people around him to help tell this specific story. Absolutely. It's not really like, ooh, it needs to have this grit because I'm attracted to this. Like he's very fluid in the way that he tells the stories, and it comes across as he doesn't have a distinct style.
They're just good general storytellers. Sure, I think at the end of the day, Spielberg's, the Ron Howards, like they're just phenomenal, straightforward storytellers, and that's not a bad thing. They're just great at telling any story in any genre. But then
they're not the star of the show. Like when Ron Howard directs a movie, he's not like you talk about his style. Like Chris Nolan is the star of a Chris Nolan movie.
Exactly.
Ron Howard is not the star of a Ron Howard movie.
Exactly. Like Nolan and Tarantino and Scorsese and all these guys, like those filmmakers have a very distinct, like that's part of the reason why I was so taken back by Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at first, because it wasn't normally what I perceive Quentin Tarantino's voice to sound like, right? Sure. And so that was a bit jarring. So going back to the full circle back to Barry Jenkins here, I worry that his voice will not be there. Okay. But considering who Barry Jenkins is, that he has a Best Picture under his belt, and that I guarantee you he probably went to the table with, if we're gonna do this, I need you to let me do X, Y, and Z. And I don't know what Guy Ritchie's deal was with Aladdin, but that movie could have been directed by McG for all I knew. It did not feel 100%. Like a Guy Ritchie movie. Okay. So I guess I just hope that Barry's style comes through.
Then today, right now, I'm gonna say to you guys that if on one side of the spectrum is what Ryan Coogler was able to bring to Black Panther, and the other side of the spectrum is what Guy Ritchie was able to bring to Aladdin, where is Barry Jenkins going to fall in this interpretation of Lion King?
I would like to think that Jenkins doesn't take this movie unless he can approach it with the same focus and respect for the continent of Africa that Ryan Coogler did with Black Panther.
I wonder if he came to them with an idea. I wonder if he had an idea and came to them.
That's what I wonder too, but Coogler is a great example to bring up here, because Black Panther is that perfect middle ground of a director's style mixed in with the gigantic element of what a studio picture is going to be, right? Yeah. So like, if you look at Fruitvale Station, which is an absolute masterpiece, Creed, his budgets got bigger, but what he wanted to say in each movie stayed the same. Yeah. Like his through line to each film got out there. Black Panther is a $200 million Marvel film. I wouldn't necessarily say, I felt Ryan Coogler's voice, but I felt like I was watching a Ryan Coogler movie.
And also he had something to say. Like it's also a love letter to a culture. Right, and exactly. I do, based on what I've read so far about, and I'm very well documented about my hatred of Jon Favreau's Lion King on the show. But I will say the one thing that sort of like perked my interest is that it sort of sounds like he wants his sequel to be like a love letter to a people, to a culture, to Africa. Okay. And that's what intrigues me. And honestly, if that's the angle that he's approaching it, then that makes me go, that's awesome. Cool. Like if you're not just gonna, like, if you're telling me this isn't gonna be like Simba's Pride, which is Lion King 2.
1.5.
1 point. Yeah, excuse me. God, what am I doing?
It's not even a full sequel.
But then I'm in. Like if that's what you're looking to do, like the fact that I heard that and we want this to be the Godfather Part 2 of Lion King movies.
Ridiculous.
That's what I sort of went, and that because they're saying that they want it to be both a flashback to Mufasa's origin story, just like Vito, and then also a continuation of Simba's story. But the idea of telling a love letter to Africa is what makes me go, okay, Barry Jenkins, you do you, man.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great to me. I guess the problem is, for me, like everything you just said is the movie I want to see. But are we going to get that film? And I think when Guy Ritchie was announced for Aladdin, I was like, oh man, this is going to be like Lock, Stock, and Snatch. And like, I was expecting more of his editing, more of his tone, more of Guy Ritchie. So I think with, what's the gentleman who scores Barry's movies, Nicholas Britell?
Yeah, I believe so.
A phenomenal composer. I know he did Beale Street. He did Moonlight. If I'm botching the name, I apologize. But he's an incredible composer. And I saw a tweet today that was they were talking about, because Zimmer did Lion King, right? He also didn't Zimmer also do the remake or the live action. I think Zimmer was still involved, even though it was his music from the first one.
I think so.
So I think with Barry Jenkins, and it's so funny, like if I saw something come across my timeline that day that said we're making a Lion King sequel prequel and it's coming out in 2022, I would have immediately rolled my eyes. But it was the Barry Jenkins part of it that really kind of hooked me, because this guy I don't think he's made a movie over $10 million. I don't know how much the budgets were for Beale Street or Moonlight, but they weren't expensive.
I was just looking. Beale Street, Moonlight was $4 according to Box Office Mojo. Moonlight was $4 million. For Beale Street, they gave him 12.
Right. So you're talking about taking on potentially what do you think it's going to be, like $200 million project?
Probably.
I mean, how much was the first line? I mean,
Yeah.
if you're looking at elevations of filmmakers, I mean, Guy Ritchie's most expensive film prior to that must have been the Sherlock Holmes film. So he actually had but if you look at Ryan Coogler, for example, Fruitvale probably cost less than $3 or $4 million. I don't know for sure. Creed was a step up.
Probably
and
like
then once
60,
he did
65.
Creed was the one that made me, he could definitely do Black Panther if he could pull off Creed. I just don't. Does Barry need another mid-budget film first?
I mean, maybe that's what it is. Maybe he just truly felt like he wanted to challenge himself and take on, the big money, huge production type thing. I don't know. We'll see.
Do you think that they're going to have to hire writers that know how to do something other than copy paste? Because I know that was a tough skill on the first one.
I assume they would have to do that. Yes.
So the budget might be even more then.
Copy paste.
I'll just mention this because it's inspiring. Fruitvale Station cost $900,000.
Wow.
$900,000 for Fruitvale
and it's
Station.
a masterpiece.
And it's literally one of the greatest movies ever made.